Aloha! Mahalo! My ohana. I've been waiting so long to say that. I haven't been to Hawaii in so long. Let me get there. Wait a minute. Ah, I'm there. I'm in Hawaii. Ah, love it. So glad to be back. I'm Judy Lobianco, past president of Shape America, and these days I am a consultant running around the country. Well, not running, but helping around the country around the pandemic and navigating the pivot that we have seen from the profession in so many ways. And it's a change that maybe we didn't expect or weren't ready for, but certainly we are united in our quest to make sure students are healthy and well. So it's a very inspiring time for our profession, although we may not think about that from day to day when we're struggling with the daily struggles of what the pandemic means. But I am certainly happy to be here today talking about assessment and the ways that assessment has been executed, should be executed, and what it means to us in this very different and unique time. So I'm going to start you out with a very difficult, essential question that I want you to ponder just for a few minutes. So when I was supervising in the public schools, I would open up my teachers' grade books and look at their classes, all their physical education classes across grade levels. And it struck me how many students had an A in physical education. And by an A, I mean in K-5, were proficient in most of the skills. At the middle and high school levels, had A's across the grade levels around participation and skill mastery and cognitive knowledge. And I say this not to upset anybody or shock you or place blame or shame on whether or not many of your kids have an A in your class. But I ask you to consider this. If I was the parent of a child in your class and they called you to substantiate a grade of a D, you'd think to yourself, well, I better have paperwork and evidence to back up why this kid got a D in my health or physical education class. The parent calls and says, I want to know why my student didn't earn higher than a D. And then you get on the phone and you say, well, here are the things that the child did not do. As a result, he gets this grade or she gets this grade. What if I was the parent that called and said, hey, I want to know right now, how come my kid is perfect in physical education? Why does my kid have an A+ in your class? And it would be really, what evidence have you collected that proves that the child is perfect, and not perfect, but got an A or an A+ on a grading scale that clearly rates across, whatever it is, 100 points. And, I'll say this on the outset, it's a pretty ridiculous scale, right? All these decades, we've been using a scale that 100 is perfect, a 0 is no grade, and that failing is around the 60% mark. Isn't that ridiculous? It really sounds silly if you really break it up, right? So you can get 60% of your stuff right, but still you get a D. 59% is an F. I never understood that myself, right? And wow, the bar is pretty high. But in our way of thinking about this, it really is about, what does the grade in physical education represent for the child, right? Because this is their experience, not our experience, right? And so we want to make sure that a grade helps the child improve, that it represents where the child is and where they need to go next, right? So I start with this slide to just put it in perspective. I want us to keep it light. This is not accusatory. If kids are getting A's in your class, that's fine. But understand what comes with the grade of an A. If a kid gets an A, that means that they are proficient and even in some ways have mastered the content that you're delivering to them in a way that helps them go out into life and be healthy and well forever and ever. Can you say that about the percentage of students that currently have an A in your physical education classes? So let's take a look at this. When I was in Hawaii back in 2017, I talked about assessment. And when I was back there in 2017, I posed these questions. What is it we're not supposed to do? I mean, it's pretty universal, the kinds of practices we're not supposed to engage in. What is appropriate What does the data tell us about how our kids are improving in our classes? What should we be assessing? And why is it so hard for us to just not let them play, right? And, you know, assessment is one of those places where it's not fun. It's not fun to grade a kid on their performance. It's not fun to feel like you're judging a kid on what they're doing in your classes. And, you know, it's a very uncomfortable topic. This is a very uncomfortable topic. And I want to add that it's a topic that takes a lot of work, right? I mean, this is not, you know, a teacher doing nothing on their prep. This is prep time used to, you know, to discover and employ developmentally appropriate rubrics that measure what it is we're getting to. We have to measure the objectives, and we have to use standards-based methods to do that. And it's not the fun part of the job, that's for sure. And that's why we do all of this back planning, so that when we get in front of kids, we can get them reflecting on their performance, getting them reflect on what it is they're learning, but also use assessment in ways that help us get them to a really important question, which is, why am I even doing this? Like, hey, teacher, why am I even here? Why is this important? What is this going to do for the rest of my life? What are these skills going to mean for me as I go into the world as an adult? And it's really important that we measure where kids are in relation to those really big, important, life-saving and life-changing questions. So here's the old physical education. We've all seen it, but also we know that it still exists, right? And I don't know whom of you out there still has a grade book that looks like this. There's no, you know, there's no judging here. This is a safe space, right? And, you know, here's the old way. If you're really good at stuff, you get an A. And if you get dressed, you get an A. Well, thanks to the pandemic, there's no such thing as that anymore. And I'm really excited about that, by the way. I'll get back to that in a minute. And then, you know, if you don't get dressed, then your grade drops because you can't play. And then, you know, get on the floor, get on the field, you show some effort, you're breathing, you're going to be fine. Hey, and if you're a really good kid, you get a good grade. If you're bad and you're a pain in my butt, you get an F. Your behavior is what causes your grade to go down. And then if I see you do stuff and I decide that it's good, that's all I use to give you the grade. Now it was very loose what I just said. I hope you're laughing alongside me because it sounds ridiculous, right? So let's go back to March 2020, the pandemic hits. The guidelines from the CDC and Shape America come out on June 16th, 2020. And in that guidance, it says, no more use of locker rooms, no more getting dressed for PE. And for a hot minute, we were all scrambling to figure out, okay, so if it's not participation through preparation, what are we going to grade on? And I've been out there pretty vocally talking about how this is a defining moment in our profession. Not to engage locker rooms, to navigate hygiene in a different way, and to not grade kids on whether they're dressed. So eliminate the piece of I'm dressed, that means I get a good grade, and what is left? Their ability to participate to the best of their own ability, and you providing assessments, resources, reflections for kids that allow them to tell you what they know and what they've learned. So I feel like the pandemic has been an awful thing. It's just the worst thing I've ever seen. People are losing their lives and their family members, and life has changed forever, and we can't connect, and it's all awful. But if we're going to pull and extract one thing that the profession can learn about itself, it's around assessment. Now understand, you know, it's pretty clear that through the pandemic, physical education has become more about getting kids active, being more physically fit, focusing on those attributes of the standards that talk about increased physical activity and enjoyment of movement, rather than the exploration of improvement of skills, motor skills, etc. Because we just don't know where kids are at. You know, we don't know what environments they're living in, what access they have to particular pieces of equipment, where geographically they are as to whether they have a backyard or a play area that they can play in, or even that they can put their camera on and feel like they have a safe space to be able to do that. So that's all stuff y'all can't control, but at the same time, we're doing the best we can in a pandemic where we're asking kids, what is it that you can use? And meeting them where they are in their own circumstances, which we come back to the differentiation piece, right? So yeah, the emphasis on assessment during the pandemic certainly is not a place you should be. The emphasis on keeping kids healthy and well and stress reduced, right? And keeping them moving so that they can manage their stress and depression is really the only focal point that I can think of that is the place where you should be. So please understand, I'm not asking you to go out tomorrow and barrel into kids with a ton of rubrics and threaten them with their grade. And I'm certainly not telling you don't give kids an A, right? I think that in this environment that we are in, absolutely, teachers should give themselves a break. We should give kids a break, but we shouldn't bow down about keeping them accountable about their own health. The focus that we are in this profession, particularly around assessment, is around student wellness and our ability to know that we're getting through to kids about why it's so important, right? For example, how important is it right now for kids to know how to wash their hands? That's us. We do that. That was our content, right? How important is it that kids get physically active so they can reduce their stress? That's us. Pick us. We're at the heart of that whole thing, right? One thing the pandemic has taught us is that health and physical education is getting a lot of play right now. We're getting a lot of attention because we are the experts in the building around this, right? So when we think about assessment, I want you to not think so much about all the formal pieces, rather what you're doing in every class every day to engage kids around improving around these pieces. All right. So this brings us to the new physical education assessments, right? And I say new, but this is really nothing new. We've been doing this for, I don't know, decades, regardless of pandemic. We know that we've got to figure out what we're teaching based on the standards, and we've got to set up objectives and assessments that speak to those standards. We know that we need to be doing developmentally appropriate assessments that are related to outcomes that are for and about kids and where we meet them where they are. That kind of differentiation that comes with understanding that, you know, not all kids are in the same place, and that makes it tricky for us to make sure we plan assessments that kids can be challenged by, but also that they can be successful with. The integration of technology is something that pre-pandemic we didn't see a lot of, and where it was happening was very successful. But it's been a very expensive proposition, as you can probably tell. Here in New Jersey, there was a huge gap between the haves and have-nots around kids even having, you know, resources available to them at home that would allow them to get on a Zoom call or into a Google Classroom. So getting up and running around technology has been something that's been not only fast and furious, but something that everybody's trying to catch up. And I think as a result of everything we've been seeing with online learning, you know, education is not going to be the same, and I don't know that it should be the same. But one thing's for sure, that if we're an educator in this day and age moving forward, without the technology integration piece, I don't know that we're going to be able to relate to our kids. This is their world. This is their wheelhouse. It's something that we've got to learn about and have a learning curve around, and have a lot of humble growth around as teachers. And you know, teaching as a tool of technology really helps us in assessment. And kids want to be able to show you what they know using their own means, right? I mean, it's much more enthusiastic for a kid to tell you what they know if they get to choose the mode through which they are assessed. And oftentimes they will decide to use some sort of technology to express themselves. And then we've got the rubrics, tons and tons of rubrics. I'm going to show you some examples here in a minute. But one thing's for sure, you know, you don't have to build these from scratch anymore, right? When I was in college, you know, 30 years ago, we had to build rubrics from scratch and do task analysis. That's all been done, and it's readily available because we've got a very robust and sharing community of teachers around the country and around the world that have been able to share their rubrics with us. I'm going to get to those resources right at the end of the presentation, but one thing's for sure, we've got plenty of unity around you not having to build these by yourself from scratch. And then, you know, you've got to think about what is it that you want to know about students in your classes, in your units, in your lessons, that produces evidence of what they've learned. So if you think about assessment in very simple terms, right? You start with the learning objective and you know it's standard aligned. What questions are you asking? And are the questions you're asking directly related to the objective, right? So if I'm a kid in your class, what do I know and I'm able to do at the end of your lesson that I didn't know and was able to do before the beginning of your lesson? How has your lesson and your objectives and your questioning techniques and your activities changed me as a student and taking me one step further toward what it is you need me to know? And that, in very simple terms, that starts with the kind of feedback you give, the kind of assessments you're asking them for, and especially your questioning techniques, your discussion and questioning techniques. All of that is relevant. And when we talk about assessment, I think some of the most important things you do, particularly in a pandemic, particularly when you're online, is the questioning techniques that you use, right? Because you can't be in front of them assessing skill performance very readily. So the kinds of direction and discussion that you give them, and the ways that you get them to speak to their peers is crucial around what it is. You can't know what they know unless they tell you. And you certainly can't assess their skills unless they show you. So a lot of this comes toward, giving the power to the kids to be able to express themselves, in writing and physically by performance. And, when you're online, it becomes very essential. And so what are we trying to collect? What is it we want to say the grade is? Well, we want to know that students have grown in some way. How do we produce that evidence? And we want to know, that we know where they are so that we're not repeating the same things that they already know. I had many of my seniors in high school saying, how many times I learned the FIT principle? How many times someone repeated information to me that I learned in the 6th grade? I had a 7th grader one time say to me as a supervisor, you know what, Ms. Lovianco, no one around here asks me half of what I really know. And I'm like, wow, out of the kids' mouths comes the truth, which is why it's so important that part of assessment is really find out what they already know. You don't want to get stuck in a situation where your kids get bored, where they get disconnected and disengaged because you're repeating things that have already been done, especially now when the emphasis is on fitness and physical activity in the pandemic. We got to make sure to keep it fresh and new and exciting and engaging for kids. And again, that lens of the lifelong pursuit of mastery. And I don't want to discount at this point, in this unique moment we're in, how important it is for us to teach children from the inside out. You can't assess whether or not you're able to improve a child's self-esteem. But one thing's for sure, you can plan for those moments when you're trying to encourage them, care for them, let them know you're there for them, and check in with them regularly by asking questions about their levels of stress and depression and anxiety. That's all part of what we do as wellness experts in the schools and part of the competencies of physical literacy. So really important not to discount those pieces, particularly when we're in this unique moment in time. I think as human beings, regardless of whether we're teachers or students or parents, we're feeling the effects of the lack of connectedness with people. Our social health has really suffered, and that's a shared experience we have with students. We're all human beings and we're going through this together. And it's important not to discount the fact that you can really build objectives and assessments around how to keep one's mental health intact, how to build social emotional learning into your physical education classes so that you can get to the heart of how kids are doing, right? And when you do that, when you teach a child from the inside out, it's much easier to teach them out here with their skills, with their physical attributes, with their ability to bring, performance and knowledge once you get them from the inside out. Just wanted to mention that. So we got to link instruction to learning targets. And we've got to literally, when we've picked those objectives, the moment we say this is what we're going to do today, you got to be thinking about what questions am I going to be asking kids that relate directly to this? And what is going to happen at the end of this lesson that gets the evidence that kids have learned what it is I've asked them to learn? And you know, if assessment does nothing else, it provides data and evidence to show the world, look, we've always been a very important subject area. And thank you very much. You're all figuring it out right now that student wellness and physical activity and health literacy and physical literacy is probably the most important thing that's happening in the middle of a pandemic, because we're trying to keep kids alive. We're trying to keep kids focused, alive. We're trying to de-stress them and keep them from getting depressed. And that's our wheelhouse. We are the experts. We're the social emotional learning experts. We are the folks in the building that are able to build a culture of wellness. I think this is our moment, right? Sadly, in the middle of a pandemic, this is our moment. And assessment is just one small piece of proving our worth, proving what we do, proving that this is not a bunch of people going out on the field and rolling out a ball. Because any Joe Schmo can do that. Your certificate says you need to assess for learning. Joe Schmo can't come in here and get kids to play kickball and assess them the way we can, right? And hey, many have tried, right? I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were personal trainers getting all over YouTube saying, I'm the world's greatest phys ed teacher. I will save these children. Come do my workout. That's not physical education, right? These are not physical education teachers who are getting out there and getting 1 million hits on their YouTube videos. What you do is unique. What you do as a certified professional in your field is to bring these types of assessment pieces in and know how it's supposed to look and how to give kids feedback on that performance. So I don't want you to forget, like, you're the expert. You're the expert. We're all talking student wellness right now. We're in a pandemic. We're talking about physical, emotional, and social health. That's all you. You got to step up to the plate on behalf of your kids. So what do we consider authentic, Judy? Well, we know that these criteria are articulated in advance. We have to let kids know what it is they're being assessed on. It's not supposed to be a secret. It's not supposed to be, today we're going to be doing a whole bunch of different physical activities, and how I'm going to grade you on it is a big fat secret that you'll learn at the end of the course when you get the report card. We never want a kid to say, I don't know how I got this grade. We never want a parent to call and say, I want to know how my kid got this grade, right? We want to be transparent, and we want to let kids know what exemplary work is, what it looks like, how it feels, and where the bar is, right? I mean, many a classroom teacher, even in health education, posts student work on the walls to show kids evidence of exemplary performances, but also in the middle of a class, it's not uncommon for you to show the kids the rubric. Look, this is A work, this is B work, this is C work. How much effort are you going to put in? This is why rubric assessments are so important, right? We know that a 3 is the top and a 1 is the lowest, or a 5 is the top and a 1 is the lowest. We only need to think about how we get assessed as teachers. I don't know what it's like there, but in New Jersey, we're on an evaluation rubric where 4 is the most distinguished teacher you can be, and 1 is not good. And so when I used to evaluate teachers, I'd send them the paperwork. They weren't interested in any of my comments. Nobody cares about what I had to say. They went right for the score. Am I a 4? I want to be a 4. And if I'm not a 4, why am I not a 4? And although I joke that teachers do this, kids do it too. Kids want to know. If the rubric is 1, 2, 3, and 4, what do I want to decide I'm going to do? My level of participation is right in front of me. This is what I need to do to be a 4. This is what happens if I'm a 1. So that transparency is extremely important. And you need to know, I don't want you stopping instruction for assessment. It should be seamless and part of your instructional strategy. And you see this most often with fitness testing, right? Everybody stop, all 30 of you, we're going to stop everything that's happening. And for the next 2 weeks, you're going to sit on the bleachers while we go one by one and do sit and reach. And then the next day from now, we're going to do the pacer. And then the next day, we're going to do curl-ups. And then the next day, we're going to, yeah, that's not good. I mean, these should be assessments that are embedded in your instruction. So if, let's say you have station work, you might have an assessment station where your back is on the wall or in the play area, and you're watching the class, but kids are rotating through an assessment station where they're doing a peer rubric, or they're being videotaped for performance, or they're doing a fitness test. Assessment should not take away from your instruction. Assessment should be embedded in your instruction. And I'm reminding that the national standards are out there, that they are a pretty well-documented, acceptable use of 5 major standards toward physical literacy with embedded Common Core language that we should be familiar with. Of course, your state standards trump everything else. The state standards are most important, but many of us have seen these national standards, and they certainly apply to the motor skill, fundamental skills at the K-5 level, invasion, net and wall games and fitness at the middle school, and then student choices around individual, dual, and team pursuits at the high school. And before the pandemic, these standards were very significant. And we know that we want kids to develop knowledge and skills around physical fitness. However, I point out that the big part of these standards that really struck me when they were redone was that we took out that you're responsible for kids to be physically fit. And I'm relieved about that for our profession, because it should not be your responsibility to make kids physically fit. You need to help them know what it takes to be physically fit and give them the tools and the resources that they need and the skills that they need to seek out evidence about how to get fit, right? They need to know the 5 components of health-related physical fitness. They need to know how to test for it, and they need to know what exercises can help them improve it. But you should not solely be responsible, because quite honestly, we all know in this profession that 60 minutes a day of physical activity is the child's responsibility, and their ability to improve their fitness level is solely up to them, and something that we're not going, sadly, we're not going to affect in the time that we have them in physical education, K through 12. So I hope that relieves you and helps you come off the hook about, if all my kids aren't physically fit, I'm a horrible failure as a teacher. No. And you just need to think about the kids who struggle in our classes, right? We are graduating kids out of high schools across this country who are obese. We're graduating kids who don't know how to shoot a basket. We're graduating kids in physical education who are not confident about their skills in PE, but that doesn't mean that we've been an awful failure. It means that we're trying to embed an enjoyment of physical activity for life. We're trying to help them internalize the messages of being healthy and well for life. And when they choose to kick in those competencies, is going to be up to them, right? So, but what I love about the document, just to add to this, is the grade level outcomes. I think this is a great document, and you can find that on the Shape America website. What is it that we should know and do at each grade level, while understanding that not all kids are in the same place, but it certainly gives us a place to start our objectives. So I'm sure you're checking these off as I go and saying, yep, Judy, I'll use it. Yep, I got it. Yep, I'm with you. Yep, I know. So these are all good reinforcement pieces. Now, I'm pulling the pandemic into this assessment conversation because there is explicit language in the joint CDC Shape America pandemic considerations from June 2020 that you need to be thinking about continuously as we move out of this COVID-19 era. Some of you might still be in a hybrid situation there. Many of you might still be online, while others of you are able to see your kids in person or outside. There are many considerations here to keep kids healthy and well, and it's really important that we embrace this idea around assessment for learning or assessment of learning. And so I want you to take a look at these 2 explicit definitions. So the assessment for learning is the more informal feedback that you give them regularly. It's the stuff that assessment is made of. What you're going to do to affect the life of a kid is embedded in the assessment for learning, right? That corrective specific feedback you give them, the praise, the feedback on their performances. That's the stuff you do like every 10 seconds, right? And then the formal of learning piece, the demonstration of the knowledge and the skill. And that's that you have to separate these, right? And sometimes we call this informal assessment, but for our purposes around the pandemic, specifically, you've got to differentiate these two pieces and understand that just because your grade book is not robust with the things it normally would have, doesn't mean that you're not assessing kids. I mean, it used to be said to me that we assess every 10 seconds, because what we do is to move around the classroom, whether it's virtual or in person, and our eyes are scanning for performance. And every time we say to a kid, Jonathan, I love the way you followed through, what do we do that 1 million times a day? That's assessment. So please rest assured that you're doing it probably every 10 seconds or so, and you probably don't even realize it, right? Again, directly from the CDC document with Shape America, use backward planning to develop the assessments, asking these questions. What do you want to do? How are you going to measure it? And what are you doing in terms of activities that are going to work toward these goals? So we've seen this before, right? We've seen a lot of short 3-minute warm-up videos with kids. We've seen lots of innovative Bitmoji classrooms, asking kids to click all over these assignments and assessments. We've seen a lot of great things around hybrid learning where the teacher has their kids online, but they also have kids in front of them and they're trying to navigate that hybrid environment. And those of you who are in it right now are going, like, I don't know who came up with that hybrid thing, but oh my goodness. So you know, this is going to be unique to you. This is going to be unique to your school, your environment, your kids. And you know, don't feel bad about wanting to ask your kids, like, how is this going for you all? What do you need? Like, this is your experience. Tell me if I'm too much. Tell me what it is your needs are. Tell me where you're struggling, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen over the past year when I observe student teachers. Does anybody have any questions? No, nobody has any questions. Why don't they have any questions? Because they don't want to be the one that raises their hand and feels vulnerable, right? You know, and then that fateful question, does everybody understand? I don't know, do they? How do we get them to that? How do we get them to show us what they know? How do we get them to articulate what they know? And again, last slide from the actual document. All of these pieces have been the advice and the guidance that we've been asked to give while you're in, you know, a hybrid, online, etc. And I really like the recommendations around journaling and written evidence and video evidence. I know a lot of teachers are asking their kids to videotape themselves doing certain skills and sending those in. It's very important to know that the privacy issues around videotape is extremely important. So if kids are doing video on their phone, we have to make sure that we protect their privacy and make sure that we use those in the classroom for assessment purposes only, and that we have permissions from the school district and the school to be able to do those videotaped assessments. And that varies from state to state, from school to school. And then when we're talking about rubrics, they've got to be simple. You know, they've got to be easy to understand. They can't go crazy. We just have to know, we have to tell kids what it is they're being assessed on. We have to know, we have to articulate to kids, when I look at you perform a skill, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. And to let kids know, look, if you're manipulating an object, as the teacher, my eye is not on the outcome of the object. It's on you. Like, think about the way that you navigate an activity where there's a ball or an object. Do you follow the ball and comment on the ball, or do you comment on the kid and their performance and their skills, right? It's funny, it's counterintuitive. When I talk about assessment, I say, you know, throughout our athletic lives, we were told, you know, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the ball. But as we teach, no, keep your eye on the child, you know, so, and comment on the child. Don't comment on the score or the basket or the, you know, nice shot, you know. I mean, it's nice to say nice shot, but what about it made it a nice shot? All right. So at the middle and high school levels, I just want to remind that as life hopefully gets back to normal, that there's this emphasis on a departure from team endeavors. And it's because we know that children will not typically go on to, you know, grab 24 of their favorite friends and go off on a soccer field. It may not be that they go after, you know, 5-on-5 basketball or pick up and do lacrosse. Even though those might be some athletic pursuits that they take in college, we know that for a lifetime, they're typically using the lifetime sports and skills. You know, pickleball is one of the major examples I use here. Who knew? Pickleball, right? Pickleball got so incredibly big. Is it big in Hawaii? Because over here, whoo, unbelievable. Golf for the seniors, and now pickleball. I'm so excited for pickleball. I really am. So I digress a little bit. But yeah, so those opportunities to allow for kids to choose their activities helps them become more motivated to do those in life, right? So no longer are we asking the high school kid to be forced to play in a soccer game and just be like this, and I'm afraid I'm gonna get hit with the ball. You know, I'm not saying don't teach these units at the middle and high school levels. I'm saying that the focus and the emphasis is on things like invasion, for example, and offensive and defensive strategy. And so the unit at the middle school level might be called invasion. And throughout that unit, you're playing these activities and showing the kids ways that it represents invasion, right? So the objectives are about invasion, not about, you know, the game, right? So the lesson title is not, you know, soccer, it's invading space, or the lesson is not entitled basketball, but rather it's entitled how to find open space against a defender. So just think about those kinds of the explicit language you use around those national standards. Yes, we're still playing these games, but the language is changing. And then, of course, when I think education during 2020 and 2021, I think about it, the technology that's been integrated. I think we've all become students of the digital world, a world that kids have been very comfortable in for quite some time. And, you know, the use of these technology pieces have been very helpful and readily available for kids on their phones or on their watches, etc. But not every kid is in the same place with this, and it can get very expensive. There is a lot of pandemic relief funding for technology in the schools to help kids, you know, maintain that academic loss gap. And funding is available to buy some of these things if your district is interested in doing that. But we have engaged kids in lots of ways, not the least of which is Zoom, but also in devices such as Flipgrid, Padlet, Google Classroom, etc. One of the biggest things that came out of physical education during the pandemic that I think I will always remember for the rest of my life is the use of Bitmoji classrooms to engage kids in these fun journaling activities and these exercise videos. It's been pretty cool to watch, you know, but it's also very important that we don't force the kids to do the exact same thing every day, because they will get bored. They will get bored. And you'll get bored. I mean, we'll get bored. All right. So let's talk a little bit about developing these scoring guidelines real quick before I end. I like to see 3 or 4 levels of scoring rubrics, and they kind of sound like this. You're great. You're good. You're okay. You need some help. How was that? Thank you. Now we know that in each particular skill, this might look different. How to do the overhand serve in volleyball. We know what a 4 looks like as a physical educator. We also know what a 1 looks like. We have to explicitly explain that to kids. So let's say it's a badminton game. That's what it might look like. And I'll do a couple of these examples. And the age is not really important. Or a game of doubles. And the score becomes always is able to do the ready position, sometimes is ready to do the ready position, can't do the ready position. The frequency with which they're able to perform the skill with the degree of proficiency. And here's a participation rubric. You know, this is where we get out of the thoughts around you're dressed for class and you're breathing and you're on the gym floor, so you get an A. So you notice how I do say you got to be prepared for class, because that's part of the self-responsibility piece. But also you can use a rubric for participation that includes, you know, a willingness to help others, staying on task, following direction, help, you know, practicing and playing to the best of their ability, and you know, being there. And then the rubric takes on this life of its own. This could be a daily rubric, a weekly rubric, an every 2 weeks rubric. You know, you don't want to assess every day and drive yourself crazy. You're not digging into your grade book every single day with daily grades, if you can avoid it. All right. And then here's an example of a volleyball game assessment. What is it that you're looking to assess, and are they always able to do it? Another piece of criteria here. This is for volleyball. Right, and so we've got this formal set of criteria that you can do, that the kids can do for each other, that the kid can do for themselves. I love exit slips as a form of formal assessment. And then I love the kinds of informal evidence we have, particularly online. Go to the chat box and rate from 1 to 10 how comfortable you feel with the skill we learned today. Everybody show me the way your hands are supposed to look when you get a pass in a basketball game. Give me a thumbs up, everybody, if you think X, Y, and Z. This is a way to engage all kids so that you know where everybody is. The assessment for learning piece. I love that on the screen. I used to love seeing that in the student teachers that I used to assess this past year. You know, give me a thumbs up if, you know, and they can actually put it, if it's an icon in the reactions on Zoom, they can actually put the thumbs up. So, and when I teach at the college level, I'm teaching virtually now, and I use the chat box often. I use polls on the virtual space very often so that kids have an opportunity to participate. And, you know, there's other ways. There's always Kahoot, the use of Padlet, so that kids have a responsibility to express what they know. And then the written exams, you know, back in my day when I was an actual student, yes, I had to take the 50-question volleyball test that started with who created volleyball and ended with how long is the length of the net and how high is it. Nobody cares about that. And that's not information kids are going to retain. So written exams have got to be meaningful. I'd rather they all be open-ended so that kids can tell you what they know rather than trying to catch them in what they don't. And so we're moving away from true, false, multiple choice into this self-expression, open-ended world of journaling and self-reflection. And then just some really quick pieces. A level 1 would be just to remember and understand. And then level 2 to apply and analyze. If you're thinking about a rubric from 1 to 4, right? And this is where kids, you know, move up the ladder. And then level 3, evaluate and create. And we want to give assessment over to kids. We want them to be able to create portfolios and create journaling and research on the internet, reliable sources and valid sources of information. Because when they leave us, they're going to be left on their own, right? I mean, we experience it all the time, right? When we pick a doctor or when we decide to join a fitness facility, how do we scrutinize what we're going to do and whether we should sign a contract, right? Those are the kinds of things we want them to be able to build on their own. We want them to be able to create and make decisions on their own and know that that criteria is there. And these are the words we use to identify that level. And to this, I would add not only what if, but so what? So what does this all mean now? What is my why? Why are we doing this? So designing assessments, they got it. They kind of got it. They're getting there, right? So we've got 5-level rubrics, 4-level rubrics. The one I like the most, that's easiest to assess in your classroom with 30 kids in front of you, this is the daily piece I would totally recommend. By looking at what's going on with your kids, do you know who has it? Do you know who's struggling? Do you know who needs to get there? This is a little easier to assess than, you know, the deep rubric that I just, the set of deep rubrics that I just described. And then videotaping kids, just a couple of recommendations. I like videotape because it helps you to really dig into having the kid watch their performance. There's lots of research about the emphasis on what it means to a kid to see their performance in front of them. And then peer review of a videotape. You know, give a peer the rubric to watch the performance of another and give feedback. And then as a backup. This is where you would be reviewing the video to see where the rubric lands. And I like that if I'm telling you that assessment is something that is ongoing and should not disrupt instruction, this is where you set the video camera up at one station and it videotapes the kid at that station. And the station is videotape yourself doing the skill and use this rubric. Jude, this is too much. Just tell me where to get this stuff. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to look all this up. Well, lucky for you, we have got colleagues in this profession that have been so gracious and so unified around putting this stuff like basically all in one place. And what I like about this is that there was a husband and wife team here in Chicago, Illinois, Mark and Becky Fulmer, who, you know, partnered with teachers from across the globe and have put tons of rubrics, assessments, and templates together at cbhpe.org/resources. So please check that out and build from there those assessments which you feel you can get the most out of. I think it's a great site anyway, instructionally. There's lesson plans, there's technology resources, there's resources in equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's resources in social emotional learning. This is just really a clearinghouse that has really exploded during the pandemic because people wanted to go one place to get help. If you want to look back on Twitter and go to #HPE at home, lots of sharing that has happened there over the past 11 months if you're on Twitter. And of course, you can always go to Shape America. They've been giving a lot of teacher tools away during the pandemic to assist the profession, particularly around the social emotional learning piece. But also there's lots of great assessments there on social emotional learning. But this is where I would start, cbhpe.org/resources. And then there's a big panel in the middle for assessment. And you will be digging into those links for quite some time. So I hope they're helpful. I just want to thank you for your attention today. I think about all of you and the work you are doing with children and how life-changing and life-saving it is. We're talking about assessment here, but what we're really talking about is your ability to continue to connect with them at such a difficult time where you are. And I hope that you are doing a lot of self-care and doing the work that needs to be done to keep you and your families healthy. And just thank you for your selfless commitment to these children. I'm happy to be part of it and happy to take any questions or information that you'd like. I have my Twitter handle there and then my email address if you'd like to learn more, talk more, and connect. So thank you so much for your attention today, and I appreciate you. Take care of yourselves.